Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everyone.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer insights and ideas for how emerging small and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can establish and grow their business.
Bruce and I have been working in CPG commercial operations for over 30 years, working on brands of all sizes. By commercial operations, we mean all aspects involved in establishing and growing brands across channels and platforms. On our show, we bring on guests that are brand founders, leaders, investors, as well as all kinds of suppliers to these emerging brands that are subject matter experts to share their unique insights with the audience.
To keep up with the show, please follow the Road to Retail podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Leave us a review and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. You can also check out our website at www.road2retail.com and follow The Road to Retail on LinkedIn. Let's get to today's episode. Since 1994, the Emerson Group has been the trusted partner to brands, retailers, suppliers, and the CPG industry. Their people are CPG professionals and omnichannel commerce experts. They have built a fully integrated infrastructure with a suite of services and capabilities focused on launching and accelerating the growth of health, wellness, and beauty brands. Powered by their proprietary Omega AI data technology platform, which utilizes a brand's insights and data analytics to create a brand's go-to-market strategy, optimize their omni-channel distribution, build marketing plans, and optimize supply chain. The Emerson Group infrastructure and capabilities serve brands in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. To learn more, visit their website at www.emersongroup.com.
So Bruce, tell us about our newest sponsor.
Glad to, Tracy. Tired of getting crushed by chargebacks each time your brand sells product? From dealing with hundreds of forms that all look different to fighting tooth and nail to get repays, managing deductions is tough work. And you're almost certainly leaving money on the table. Fortunately, there's a solution. Floret was built to help brands like yours. With Floret's software platform, you can automate your deductions workflow, get insight into your trade spend, and even have your deductions disputed for you. Whether you're a scrappy young brand trying to break into retail or an established supplier looking to get sharper on trade, Floret will put money back in your pocket. We've saved brands hundreds of thousands of dollars this year alone. Visit www.tryfloret.com to book a demo and learn more. That's www.tryfloret.com.
Again, we encourage you to subscribe to our iTunes or Spotify channel at Road2 Retail.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of The Road to Retail. Tracy Priest, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Bruce, as always, and I'm really excited about our episode today.
Well, why don't you not hold the drama any longer? Why don't you tell us who's joining us today, and then we'll let them introduce themselves and tell us how they got here.
Absolutely. So on today's episode, we have Caroline Grace, and Caroline is the founder and CEO at Product and Prosper. So welcome, Caroline, to the show. We're glad to have you. This is going to be a great discussion. And before we jump into our topics today, why don't you tell our audience a little about you and your background and how you came to create a Product and Prosper.
Thank you so much, Tracy and Bruce. I know we've been discussing this podcast for, I think, over a year at this point. So I'm so glad that I can finally join you guys.
Well, your talent agent has been very demanding about your availability.
Yes, my executive assistant for sure. She protects my schedule, which is always good. But yeah, I'm super excited to join you guys. Like you guys mentioned, Thank you, audience. My name is Caroline Grace. I'm the founder and CEO of Product and Prosper, which is a portfolio of brands plus agencies that are my hypotheses of how the next generation of CPG consumer goods brands will grow. My background is in all things CPG. I initially got into the industry because I won a pitch competition in college and I looked into how to start a brand and I couldn't figure it out. Couldn't figure out step one. So what I did was I went and worked for a supplement brand. I came on and supported their marketing team. I learned everything about the e-com space. And then I pivoted into B2B tech sales to see if I wanted to go into that. And then I came back to CPG, built a couple different wine brands. And since I had both B2B sales experience as well as a marketing background, I had a number of different brands come to me asking for wholesale sales. And so essentially, that pivoted me into retail expansion. And over the last 5 years, I've been studying how brands grow into omni-channel and ultimately into retail. If retail is the ultimate goal for CPG brands, especially food and beverage brands, to either look for exit or to as the indicator of ultimate scale, how do you build the roadmap to get there? That is essentially how I've gotten to Product and Prosper, which is essentially an ecosystem.
Love that. That's awesome. So I know you have a couple of different um, products, so to speak, or offerings under Product and Prosper. So talk to us a little bit about like the product lab and retail lab and the different things that you do to help
Yeah,
CPG
certainly.
brands.
Well, I think fundamentally, Product and Prosper is a launchpad for brands. So I own equity in a number of different companies, and I'm building out some of my own product-based businesses under Product and Prosper as a studio and as a venture studio. So that is the one side of what I do. But these nodes are also services for hire. So, for example, I have the Product Lab, which is my market validation service. I have over 1,200 industry experts, all with credit cards on file, who give feedback on products, concepts, and prototypes before they go look for placement within retail or for investment or expansion into the market. So I needed feedback from people who knew exactly what made brands scale. And so I've consolidated that into an entire system that provides that information that brands need to take the next steps. So that's one side. The Prosper Lab is my independent retail growth team. So I focus on growth through FAIR, which is a platform that connects brands and independent retailers. The way that I would essentially think of it is it's like Amazon for wholesale. So we have a full service independent retail growth strategy uh, service team where we optimize profiles, we conduct all of the outreach, and then we do all of the ongoing management for brands on the platform. My hypothesis is that the future of CPG is very connected and community driven, and I am a true believer that independent retail provides two things within the market. It brings back localized buying, so it creates more customer demand, consumer demand by creating more localized buying opportunities through independent retail, and it also enables brands to scale out through bigger retail because they have this base of data available to them a data story to bring to bigger retailers when they're ready. So those are my primary two. I also have other things that I'm building out, one of which is the Retail Lab, which is a 600-person community connecting experts and brands, because I want to democratize the availability, as it seems like you guys do too, of hyper-specific information around retail scaling. And then I also have a brand called Captain, which I'm building out. I believe that the brands that are founder-led within CPG are the ones that get them out, scale faster. And so I'm building out a personal branding agency for CPG brands as well. So a lot of fun things. I'm very good at
Wow.
operational
Holy
structures and
cow.
teams.
Caroline, when do you sleep? I wanted to dive in a little bit because I'm actually a part of that ecosystem that provides feedback. So talk about a little bit about how that works, how you send out samples and you get feedback and things like that. Just go into a
Yeah,
little deeper feedback because I think that's a great way to do it and great for brands. Great for
yeah.
brands.
No, I appreciate it. And thank you for being part of it. Any
Yes.
feedback, please let me know. I'm always looking for feedback. The product lab essentially makes feedback accessible for small brands. So early on in building out a product-based business, I really am a big believer in feedback, but most consumer testing out there costs over 10, 12, $13,000 plus. The product lab really has a low price tag because the industry experts within there are motivated to help emerging brands. The way that it works is it's a no risk sampling program, depending on the stage of product, whether you're a concept or a prototype or a product that is growing in the market. We can run a survey, we can run a focus group, and then we can also run a product sampling feedback test. So the brand just selects how many samples that they want to send out or the amount of participants they want. We facilitate the whole thing. And the key difference is we have all credit cards on file because you and I both know how retail works with samples, right? And I
Yes.
know industry experts are very busy, but this incentivizes timely feedback because what if a product is received and feedback is not given, then the industry expert is charged for the product plus shipping and the brand gets reimbursed just like a D2C order. So it's a no risk sampling program that provides feedback from the people who know what actually scales brands.
Yeah. That's great. Great program.
That
Bruce?
is
Yeah.
that is yeah, that's really interesting. Tracy asked about sleeping. I was going to say, I wish you would become more motivated to actually participate in helping brands grow. But kidding, of course. With your 15 companies, that's outstanding, and I love that risk-free sampling because that's the biggest pushback. I mean, samples, whether it's in Whole Foods or something that comes to your house, I still think that's one of the most effective ways to drive trial. So the fact that you're helping fine tune that even before you spend the money on a consumer effort, I think is brilliant. So Caroline, tell us a little bit about the importance of a brand having a vision. Because I think one of the things Tracy and I hear a lot, we hear lots of ideas, and I don't think an idea and a vision are synonyms. I think they're quite different. An idea might be kind of easy to have, but to actually shape that into a vision and do something with it. So what do you think about that?
An idea versus a vision. I
No, no,
think
but why does a brand need a vision and not just say, "Hey, I think people would like purple paperweights." The brands on your website, these things all have vision.
certainly, yeah. I think a vision is obviously a guiding light, and an idea is the execution of that guidance. So, one of the biggest questions that I ask when I'm evaluating brands to either invest in personally or to even support is I always want to know where in 3 to 5 years they want this to go. One, I want to understand what motivated the creation of the business because that's usually the why, and that usually comes from the founder's why, the founder's purpose. And then secondarily, I want to know where they want it to end up because that determines the path to scale and then the ideas that are integrated into that path to scale.
Interesting.
Great.
Okay.
Now, Caroline, you touched on this a little bit, but go a little bit deeper on your belief about you mentioned earlier about founder-led brands. What's your view on, how the founder-led brand, they need to have a purpose? And one of the things you just said, which I totally agree with, is when you uncork that why as to why the person developed this, that really kinds of lead to it. But I'll talk a little bit about some of these DNA traits that these founders have in all the work you've done.
Certainly, I talk a lot about this with one of my personal coaches. She runs a company called Human AF, and she thinks a lot about founder alignment. And if a founder is misaligned with either the vision or the purpose of what they're building, the why behind everything, it can be felt within every single cell and fiber of the company. It'll show up on the P&L. It'll show up in the way that the team operates. So I think as you scale a brand, and we see this time and time again across big companies, not even just in CPG, the founder's purpose, the founder's space and time to create becomes the guiding factor behind the entire health of the organism. Um, when I say founder-led brands, I think there's two differentiating factors. One, there's founder's purpose, right? You can have a founder purpose and build a business without having a founder-led brand. Founder-led brands are content specific. So, for example, Corpse Reviver or Grace Beverley is one of the people that I admire most within within business. They are founder-led brands. They have brands underneath them, but their content is what drives, and their face is what drives their businesses. A purpose can be separated out and doesn't necessarily need the founder to be the face of the brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We've dealt with brands on both sides of that aisle. We've had some very dynamic founders, which are part business people, part Barnum and Bailey ringmaster. They're so entertaining, creating content and driving science. And we've also run into people, as I'm sure you have. They've had a great idea, but they're okay being the founder and participating, but they don't want to be the leader. And to me, that shows a great deal of introspection, right? That,
Certainly.
they don't have the desire or skill set to go out and negotiate with Fair or Kroger, but they do know how to create and shape their brand and deliver that vision. Tracy?
Yeah.
Very interesting. I love that. So talk to our audience a little bit, Caroline, about your 10 P's methodology and then how that helps small and emerging brands. This is fascinating. I think our audience is going to love this.
Yeah, certainly. The 10 Ps methodology is something that I developed in my study of how to scale brands within this industry. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, the way that I got into this was a pitch competition with my own product idea, and I didn't know the first place to start. And my 10 Ps are essentially the roadmap that I've learned after working with 300 plus brands to how to actually scale a sustainable CPG brand. Sustainable meaning profitable over time and having longevity within the market and being necessary within the market. The first one is P, the first P is product, obviously, and the last P is prosper. Essentially, it is a methodology where we have to build the base first, right? The foundational P's, the product, the positioning, the pricing, and the packaging. And then it moves up through how to operationalize through production and pitch and presence, and then into people and then the plan to prosper ultimately. So it is essentially a roadmap that I follow when I'm building out brands.
Very good. Very good. That's
Yeah, that's very logical, and I like the alliteration there as well. Makes it easier to remember. So,
Thank
so
you.
Caroline, tell the audience a bit about FAIR and why you believe it's a wonderful way for brands to get started.
Certainly. Um, Fair, like I shared, is essentially an Amazon for wholesale, for direct distribution, and it specializes on, well, they're expanding into bigger retail, but it specialized traditionally on independent retailers, which is typically where there's less than three stores or three locations within a retailer, and the owner is typically the direct buyer. When I was a wholesale sales rep, one of the biggest problems was both discovery of and acquisition of new accounts, as well as maintenance and management of those accounts. And Fair simplifies that entire system because it's a discovery-based marketplace fueled by SEO. It enables easier acquisition of new retail accounts for brands if the profile and the products are optimized. And then it also centralizes the communication and management and trade marketing needed to maintain and build loyalty for independent retailers over time. So I'm a big believer in Fair. I'm very close with the Fair team. I think that it centralizes something that was very difficult to digitalize and brings it into an ecosystem that enables brands to scale pretty much overnight. That said, I think that there's two places where Fair can be helpful for brands. One is either you're entering the retail market, and the other is you're rounding out your retail market. So you're rounding out with alternative points of distribution. Those are the types of strategies that I find work the best for brands going on to Fair.
just a little bit about the cost. So Fair, and I'm very familiar with it, is kind of a portal. So two questions to deep dive into this is how do emerging brands get noticed on Fair because there's lots of products, And two is what's kind of the cost structure, like the margin they require and who handles shipping, and maybe a little more detail around that for people that aren't familiar with FAIR.
Sure. So Fair ultimately is a marketplace, right? So in its marketplace model, it operates essentially like a rep system, and they charge any retailer that's referred to your brand, you get charged about 15% of the order value, just like a traditional sales rep would cost, or a field rep would cost. So the costs associated are going to be pretty much they're the commission, they're the marketing spend. So for example, promoted listings, but also promotions. It's also going to be the cost of shipping, some of which you can charge depending on how you set it up to the retailer. And the thing about Fair is it's direct distribution. It's not a distributor. So they have programs that are being built out called Fulfilled by Fair that enable a centralized warehousing system, and then they distribute the product, but those are very new. Traditionally, Fair has been direct distribution, so you're shipping it just like a D2C order through your 3PL or through your warehousing system.
Okay. So, so you, the brand, are shipping directly to the wholesale account.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So,
That's what I
so
thought.
Caroline, unlike you and Tracy, I'm not as familiar. So one further question on FAIR.
Yeah,
Does it operate nationally or is it a regional operation?
internationally, actually.
Well,
Because it's a
that was what I meant.
marketplace.
I meant internationally,
Oh,
of course. No,
okay.
I had no idea. I didn't know if this was just a regional thing that's expanding across the country. So that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah. It's a
Very,
marketplace, right? Think about it like I've shared, it's like Amazon. It's a connector ultimately that so it operates across pretty much yeah, it operates internationally.
so one final question, because Tracy and I have dealt with this with some other guests. If it operates internationally, does FAIR take up the burden of making sure ingredients and shipping rules are all followed and copacetic, or is that on the brand founder to make sure that, Bruce's awesome cookie from Virginia can actually be shipped to Argentina?
That is on the brand and the founder.
Okay.
Um, it's not it's a marketplace, right? It connects brands and independent retailers. It doesn't help as much around the logistics, although they are dipping their toes into supporting with the logistics with Fulfilled by Fair, but that is not an international program thus far.
Okay. No, thank you
Mhm.
very much. Tracy?
Awesome. So you've seen lots of brands, obviously, that you've talked about. So what early actions does a brand just have to get right out of the gate to be successful? And what have you seen brands do right?
Yeah, there's a pretty there's a formula that I personally like to follow, especially within non-refrigerated brands. One is that I like that when there's a base SKU, right? You have to figure out the product first. I like when there's a base SKU and then there's variants off of those SKUs. What that does is that enables us to expand on the D2C side with limited edition drops or collaboration drops. And then it also enables you to be categorized once in retail in a single aisle, in a single category. When we think about what to get right, it's all around those four foundational P's: product, positioning, packaging, and pricing, and making sure that those are all set up to support scale. I also would say, I think the
Those things you
foundation,
got to get. Yeah.
obviously.
So you're not a big proponent of launching 20 SKUs right out of the gate.
I think it depends on the category. For example, if you're a supplement brand, in order to compete within the space, you might have to launch 20 SKUs, but that comes down to that positioning P. And that's the
Right.
research that you do into the category competitor set in order to understand.
Yeah, one of the things, Caroline, that we've seen is when brands talk about expanding, and sometimes it's the old brand manager of me. I need more SKUs for a billboard. But the problem is if you go with too many SKUs too fast, the inventory's eating cash. If you have a product that has dating, you're burning dating. And if you have too many choices, you might kill your velocity hurdles because you're spreading sales over 8 SKUs instead of maybe your core 3 or 4, right?
Yeah. I think, especially when we think about retail, absolutely. Typically with retail, it's recommended based on velocity data to launch with a core set of 3 to 4 SKUs and then expand with the category manager within a specific retailer from there. I think on the D2C side, and when I say D2C, I mean website D2C, I mean Amazon, and I also mean TikTok Shop. I think the strategy there can be significantly different.
Hmm.
But again, I think that transition point, the transition between the digital world of CPG and then the physical world within retail is one of the most hard to navigate because it's a different playbook that needs to be built into the brand's infrastructure and architecture from the get-go.
Yep. So, folks, one of the things Caroline just said, which we've talked about many times, is if you're thinking about going to brick and mortar retail distribution, it's better to start with fewer doors with your absolute core SKUs and do a great job and expand. Those are much more favorable discussions than, hey, Bruce, you went with 8 SKUs in 2,000 stores and we're not making hurdle, and then the crying starts. Okay, Caroline,
Mm.
so you told us a few of the things that you think some of the emerging brands you've seen over the course of your career that they have to get right. While it's not as fun, it's still just as important. What are some of the mistakes you see consistently made, especially if the brand has tried some things before they engage someone like you that's experienced? What are the things when you're like, oh boy, I wish you'd
Mm.
called me 6 months earlier?
I think there's kind of two things that I would highlight. One of the things I see very often are founders who are creatives, who and I think that's ultimately what drives ideation. But there's also looking at the data for market demand. You can't sustain a business that doesn't sell product. And the consumer's feedback and the buyer feedback is ultimately the most important factor to your own expansion. And so I think one of the most common mistakes is not receiving feedback and not seeing feedback as a clear data point of whether or not a product has found product market fit. The second thing is I think that, we're in this transition phase with how to build these types of businesses, especially within food and beverage. I think there was a traditional model of how to build this type of business. You could take a product and launch directly into big retail. We're seeing that the social landscape and the D2C and the trust factor that is needed before launching into a big retailer is much more necessary than it was before. And so there's almost this sequential buildup that is beginning to make its way into how to launch these types of businesses rather than kind of like go one big retailer and spend as much money as you can.
So,
Right.
folks, another thing that Caroline just drove home that we've heard on other episodes, the one that comes to mind is when we spoke with Greg Vetter, the founder of Tessemae salad dressing. Greg also spoke of the importance of getting feedback, and Greg went another. So Caroline's got a very professionalized approach with industry experts. Greg's, as he admits, he and his brothers had very little idea of what they were doing, but they sure made some good guesses. They got feedback from people, as he said, that don't love us. They went to people that weren't their parents
Right.
or wives and brothers. And so he said, get harsh feedback because it will protect you later. So that's what Caroline's network of experts do. All right, Tracy, let's see how Caroline scares people with the next topic.
Well, I did want to say one thing. So, Caroline, we have a little saying here. We call them bumper stickers that says "My baby's beautiful." So, just a little deep dive here. How many brands come to you and say, "I have this great gluten-free chocolate chip cookie, and I sell out every Saturday at my farmer's market, and my parents love it, and my brother and my cousins love it." So, Caroline, help me get this to retail. So, how many times do you see that versus, hey, let's get real feedback, like Bruce just said, from people that aren't your family or people that you meet at the farmer's market where you have 15 to 20 minutes to talk about your brand, and at retail, you have about 15 seconds. So, do you see
Tracy,
that a
that is
lot?
one of the core reasons why I built the product lab was so that I didn't have to be the one who said, this is why you're not getting into retail,
Right.
right? Once we have more data, we can actually understand what actually is resonating with both the people closest to you, the people at the farmers market, and what is necessary to resonate at scale within retail, both with the buyers and with consumers on shelf. I think when you're early stage, there's big wins. And I think that getting positive feedback from those around you is a really big win. But if your vision, right, we talked about brand vision. If your vision is to scale this to an exit or to national retailers or even internationally, then your feedback pool needs to be national. It needs to be international in order for you to guide how to get there.
I love that because so you have a fact, how I interpret what you're saying is you have a fact-based way of telling people your baby may not be as beautiful as you think it is, and you have a nice way to say your baby's ugly without having to say your baby's ugly because no one likes to hear that, correct?
Right. My opinion is just one opinion. When we test it with 100 people, then we have 100 opinions.
There you go. Yeah, that's great. All right, well, here's a good one. So a brand founder comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want to," somebody's got an idea, and they come up to you, Carolina, on the street, and they say, "Hey, I want to start a CPG brand." What's the first piece of advice you would give somebody that comes to you and says, "I've got this idea. What do you think, Caroline?" What's the first piece of advice you give them?
Yeah, I would want to. I mean, I don't think that I'm ever in a place to offer counsel without curiosity first. So there's a pretty, I have a pretty nice sequence of questions that I like to ask. The first is typically I like to understand the idea and where they've experienced it in their life. So typically, if a founder is a first-time founder within CPG, the easiest type of product to build is one that they intimately touch. So a problem that they intimately know. That way they can build something that they need to be solved within their own life. And that is easier to market. Or on the flip side, the other caveat to that is, or it's somebody who's very, very close, like a child, their child or their grandparent or something who has that problem and they're intimately familiar with it. That's the first thing is I want to understand how they've experienced that problem themselves and how they're solving it. The next thing is I would go tell them to go to shelves. I would have them conduct something I like to call a shelf audit. I would have them take photos and look at the size of packaging, what types are packaging. The way that categories are merchandised are for needs and for margin. So we need to understand the types of brands and what need that fills for the buyer to place them on the shelves. So from the get-go, we want to understand what additive value we're making to the shelf or putting on the shelf, right? What's not there that needs to be there and has an actual reason that it needs to be there. For example, I just talked to an A2 dairy mac and cheese company. That doesn't exist on the shelf, but there is a massive consumer base who prefers A2 dairy, and that's an additive value product for the mac and cheese category. The other strategy of how to build a product for the ultimate goal and ultimate scale, which is retail shelves, is replacement strategy. So which product are you going to make a better version, right? Better meaning better either for you or more desired by the consumer that ultimately has more margin for the retailer to replace. So that's where I would start before you build anything and before you kind of invest in any sort of development or production of product is build the strategy for scale first, test it across D2C, and then build it into retail eventually.
So
I love that.
So that's great. And folks, a couple of things that Caroline just said, which we've heard before, is when you start talking about going to traditional brick and mortar, the buyer cares way more about their category performance than they care about your brand. So all the things she just pointed out are key. You know, do you fit in their category? Is your packaging retail ready? You know, you might want a box a foot long for a great shelf presence, and the buyer will be like, I get evaluated on sales per linear inch. We're not doing this. Or your product might have a margin of 34, but their category margin target is 42. So what are you going to do? And then replacement, because a lot of times, and you've heard this before, each of these category managers has to support and defend their 4, 8, 12 feet because there's someone else, there's one of their colleagues that wants 2 of their feet by saying, man, Tracy can't sell spice, but I can sell a lot more cooking mixes. Why don't you give me two of his feet? So that's why all of this really matters. Okay, Caroline. So in your career, who have you crossed paths with that's had the biggest influence on your career? And you don't need to name names, but what did this person do for you that's really stuck with you over time? Even if initially you're like, God, that was kind of harsh. And then in retrospect, you're like, that was actually really helpful feedback.
Yeah. Um, I was brainstorming on this one actually, and I think when I started traveling, I met a very good friend of mine who was also a creative coach. His name is Logan, and he owns a company called Flammable Entrepreneur. And he allowed me to go through his coaching program for complete free in exchange for doing some branding work for him. And I think that he held me accountable to posting on LinkedIn every single day without much traction. You know, my mom's commenting. Thanks. My sister's comment. Hey, hey, Anna, you're there too. Um, he helped me post on LinkedIn every single day, and that's ultimately one of the biggest ways that I've been able to have impact within the industry and to grow my own business. So I thank him for just holding me accountable to posting every single day within the first few years of growing Product and Prosper.
Love
Great.
that. Good advice. Good advice. All right. As
Mhm.
we're rounding third and heading home, Caroline, our favorite question. Tell our audience your favorite sports team, band, or brand, and why you follow them.
Probably can't say brand since you've nurtured
Yeah.
so
Well,
many.
that's like picking out and saying, "Oh, this is my favorite child." You can't do that.
Well, actually, guys, I was going to say a personal brand.
Okay.
Um, I have two, but I've already mentioned her on this call, but I really admire Grace Beverley. She's an influencer, but she's also the founder of an activewear brand called Tala. She's also the founder of a fitness app called Shreddy. She owns a productivity calendar company, and she's also the co-founder of an AI tool for influencers. Plus, she has a following of over 1 million across multiple different channels. I just think that the way that she structured her business and how vulnerably she shows up on social media is something that I greatly admire. And I would love to meet her one day. And I just think that she's building the future of how innovation within business looks, especially in the world of AI.
So who's your
Love
other one?
Uh,
it.
Donald Miller, building the story brand. Do you guys know him?
I do not.
He also has an ecosystem. He has basically codified how to make a brand resonate from a story perspective. And he has multiple different companies that do that.
I'll have to check that out. I'll have to
Yeah.
Yeah,
check out both Grace Beverly and
I've heard of
Donald.
Grace Beverly. Sadly, I'm quite sure between my wife and daughters, we probably have sent her money for her fitness wear. But that's okay. That's okay. So, Caroline, thank you so much for your time today. How can people get in touch with you to either, follow you out in the ether or learn more about your company, Product and Prosper?
Certainly. I can be found on LinkedIn, Caroline Grace, or at productandprosper.com. Feel free to send me a message or book a call.
Sounds great. Okay, Tracy, the big finish.
The big finish. Caroline, this has been awesome. Just great insight that you shared with our small emerging brand audience today. So thank you, audience, for joining us. Thank you, Caroline. Please continue to follow us on our Spotify channel, Apple Podcast. We post every Tuesday on LinkedIn. And then also check out our website at www.road2retail.com. So again, thank you, Caroline. Great episode. And thank you again, audience, for joining us.
Good luck
Thank
out there,
you.
folks.